Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Conversations. So glad to have a good audience here, and welcome to our speakers, Lindsay and Ian. Before I introduce them, I do want to make a couple of announcements here. Next week is the last week of our series on communication, and we're wrapping up with Adam Wolfer, who's going to be speaking about science communication and how science can communicate or miscommunicate their ideas. And then we're going to go on hiatus during finals week and spring break, but we will be back in the spring for a new series. And our series is entitled Race in America and Beyond. And we will be starting presentations for that on April 15th. So keep watching the website. We'll have more of the schedule up when that gets finalized. But in the meantime, you can expect to see us back on the Zooms on April 15th, again, Thursdays at noon. But this week, I want to welcome Lindsay Keevy and Ian King. Lindsay has a Master's of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. She has higher ed experience in academic advising, information technology support, and tutoring. She has been a faculty librarian at LCC for nearly 5 years now and loves helping students learn and find what they need. And I have to admit, she also helps me learn and find what I need as well, so not just the students. Ian King has his Master's of Library and Information Science from Wayne State University and recently earned his second master's degree in adult education from Portland State. Well done. At LCC, he is the guru of open educational resources and is the liaison for the BAS Teacher Education Program. So please welcome Lindsay and Ian.
Yay. Thanks so much for having us today, Courtney. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Ian, I don't have anything for this slide. Let's go to the next one. Okay, yeah, so I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Ian.
And we are library faculty at LCC, like Courtney said. And we teach students how to find, evaluate, and use information as critical thinkers. And these are crucial skills for all members of society to have. Especially in this age of information overload, alternative facts, and rapid dissemination of ideas and messaging. So misinformation often carries in just the same way a rumor does. And so we've identified 3 critical moments in this game of telephone, as our presentation is titled, that occur. So the first is the creation or the start of the rumor. The second is the spread of that information. And then the third, ultimately and hopefully, is the exposure of that rumor's validity. So we're going to examine each of these stages. So, hey, Ian, did you hear that politician said the wildest thing about global warming? I saw it on Facebook.
I know, and I can't believe it. That scumbag. I'm never voting for him again.
So the first stage of the telephone game is the creation of the rumor, okay? So whether it's an article, a meme, a news segment, or something else, rumors are usually shocking. They can be emotionally triggering or attention grabbing in some way. And you probably wouldn't consider a headline like more rain in the forecast to be exciting enough to tell all your friends about. So keep that in mind when we talk about what a rumor is. Now, you likely have heard of one or more of these terms. So when we looked into the definitions of all of these different terms, misinformation, fake news, disinformation, we kind of found that there are subtle differences between them. But it seems that misinformation is sort of an umbrella term for any false or misleading information you might see. An article in Science called The Science of Fake News broke it down even further with what these other terms reference. So they decided that fake news is fabricated information that mimics news media content in form, but not in organizational process or intent. Fake news outlets, in turn, lack the news media's editorial norms and processes for ensuring the accuracy and credibility of information. And then fake news overlaps with other information disorders, they say, such as misinformation and disinformation, which is another term you might hear thrown around. And when I looked into disinformation, I found that it was false information purposely spread to deceive people. So very similar, but disinformation tends to refer more to propaganda or pushing a political agenda forward. So you don't have to memorize the definitions of these, but if you hear any of these thrown around, just know that they kind of can refer to different things, but they all fall under that misinformation umbrella. So we'd like to hear from you who are here. Open up the chat if you have it available, where you may have seen misinformation, whether that's fake news, disinformation, general rumor spreading, anything like that. And take a moment to think about how you consume information today as well. How do you stay in touch with the world? What are you reading? What are you watching, scrolling? What are you listening to? And have you ever come across something that just didn't quite sit right with you, or perhaps was blatantly misconstrued? So you can tell us you've never seen this before. You can tell us where you've seen it. You can just say, yes, I've seen it, but I don't remember where. So let us know. We want to see what you have come up with for this. Courtney says Facebook. We were talking about Facebook at the beginning of this. Yeah. So Courtney says Facebook and social media in general. Caitlin says Facebook. Braden says just all social media basically can have this. Sean has a specific news source that he identified, Fox News. So it's really pervasive, right? Especially, with social media, there's so many social media platforms. And so that makes sense why you all would volunteer those as options. And it's so easy to post and share and spread everything that we find, whether or not it's truthful. You probably encounter fake news or misinformation even more than you realize, because it's all about targeting you in a way that you agree with or that you find believable. So if you like what you see or what you read or what you hear, you are likely to agree with that without doing any further investigation. Just like Ian did when I told him about that scumbag politician's take on global warming, right? He liked what he heard, he agreed with it, he decided he's never voting for that person again. Like, end of story. No further research needed. He made up his mind. So keep that in mind, because it comes from both sides of the political spectrum. And so, we're all susceptible to it. And now some of the statements that stood out to me when I was researching this topic were that communication today is more rapidly available to more people and it's less filtered. And also that people at all ends of the political spectrum stretch the truth. And for non-political topics, people with all different worldviews, we all have bias, right? There's a New York Times article where the author writes, if you make the rote assumption that fruit stands have fresher produce, that's implicit bias. So we all have bias, and you have to keep that in mind when you're reading and scrolling the internet.
So I found this quote while reading the book The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, which is a book we recently added to our collection, by the way, in which Carr talks about the effects the internet and smartphones have had on the way we consume information. I think this quote is quite pertinent to our topic today because so many of us rely on our phones. As we go through our discussion, I want you to keep in mind what he says here. If your phone has blunted your powers of discernment, you'll believe anything it tells you, and you won't hesitate to share deceptive information with others. We've all heard the term fake news tossed around, particularly over the last 5 years or so. But what exactly is the purpose of fake news? In the course of preparing for this, I found that fake news, generally speaking, is built around accomplishing one or more of the following 6 things. It's intended to generate money through ad revenue. Money is the driver of nearly everything internet related. Again, going back to the shallows, Carr writes, and he's not talking particularly about fake news here, but he says, Google, as a supplier of the web's principal navigational tools, also shapes our relationship with the content that it serves up so efficiently and in such profusion. The intellectual technologies it has pioneered promote the speedy, superficial skimming of information and discourage any deep, prolonged engagement with a single argument, idea, or narrative. Google's profits are tied directly to the velocity of people's information intake. And what he said about Google could also be said about any social media or news media platform. Fake news lives off of people sharing things on social media and getting others to click on the link. They don't particularly care if we believe. They just want us to click the link and generate money for them. Fake news also feeds into confirmation bias and groupthink, like Lindsay talked about earlier. In their 2019 study on fake news and media legitimacy, Harper and Bagley found that people infer news legitimacy in a way that appears motivated by their own ideological positioning. We want to believe things we agree with. Fake news feeds into this because, as Harper and Bagley go on to state, we found evidence that partisans on both sides of the traditional left-right divide have a greater propensity to believe political news that is consistent with their side and to disbelieve news that is inconsistent with it. So think about your own personal social media feeds, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what have you, and think about how often you see arguments that are particularly, political arguments that are geared to one side or the other. Unless you make a conscious, concerted effort, eventually your Facebook feed or your social media feed will tend to be skewed in one direction or the other, thus feeding into that confirmation bias. Fake news also drowns out discussion and social discourse because almost any political or divisive discussion on social media often evolves into a battle of opinion. Think about the Thanksgiving battles that we hear about, where family members are split. And the increase in fake news has also led to a decrease in actual news being shared and discussed. Yang and Horning's research last year examined the effects fake news has on the sharing of real news and found that the public may not be aware of how algorithmic choices, and that's the computer code that determines what order we see things, influence the content they see in their search engines and their social media news feeds. Their research determined that as individuals become more aware of the effects of fake news, their willingness to share any news decreases, concluding that both the flow of accurate and inaccurate misinformation is equally impacted by the growth of fake news on social media. So essentially, as fake news becomes more prevalent, and we see these political and social divisions grow, our willingness to share and discuss actual news decreases. So we lose out on that social discourse. One thing that we don't really think about is that commentary and opinion, when it's disguised as news, is actually a form of misinformation. There's no problem with news media using commentary or opinion when it's clearly delineated from journalistic reporting. The problem arises when the line between commentary or opinion and reporting is blurred. For instance, in September of 2020, a federal judge in New York agreed with Fox News that Tucker Carlson should not be taken at face value, stating, "This general tenor of Tucker Carlson's show should then inform a viewer that he is not stating actual facts about the topics he discusses and is instead engaging in exaggeration and non-literal commentary." And not to say this is only a conservative problem, the same argument was successfully made for Rachel Maddow in May of 2020. So when commentary or opinion is passed off or made for us to believe it is journalistic reporting, misinformation tends to follow. So when we see people like Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson sitting alongside actual reporters like Shepard Smith and Chris Wallace, it's easy for someone to assume that everyone is operating with journalistic integrity and that what is being broadcast is the news, quote unquote, because cable news networks are elevating non-reporters to an equal level and giving the commentary and opinion equal weight to factual reporting. When we think about fake news, a lot of times we're really thinking about this idea that it disseminates propaganda and conspiracy theories in a more mainstream manner. So as it becomes more prevalent in social media and social discourse, more people begin to accept it as truth. propaganda and conspiracy theories thrive on emotion. During World War II, the war posters played on our emotions by dehumanizing the Germans and Japanese as evil monsters that needed to be destroyed at all costs. And similar things happened as we saw the rise of the QAnon conspiracy theory over the last couple of years. The more it was broadcast, the more it was discussed, the more people accepted it as a truth. Research by Martel and his associates determined that the current studies provide causal evidence that inducing heightened reliance on emotion increases susceptibility to believing fake news, and tentatively suggests that increasing emotional thinking hinders media truth discernment. And therefore, the mechanism by which individuals fall prey to fake news stories closely resembles how people make mistakes on questions such as those found in a cognitive reflection test. That is, people mistakenly go with their gut when it would be prudent to stop and think more reflectively. So as fake news and conspiracy theories and misinformation gain more mainstream awareness, people tend to react to them as if they're the truth, and without stopping and thinking what it really means. And then one of the last purposes of fake news, and this isn't really a purpose, but it's something we see all the time, is when humor and satire is mistaken for the truth. Satire plays, a special role under this umbrella term, because it's important to realize that satire, when we know it's satire, we know that it's being humorous and it's being, ironic, and it's making fun of what's going on in the world. But when it's shared either knowingly or unknowingly as real, it constitutes fake news. There have been numerous occasions in which satire has been shared by mainstream media outlets. There was a time the Onion convinced China's main news agency that Kim Jong-un had been voted the sexiest man alive. The Onion also fooled New York Times into believing that Obama won a huge portion of the tween vote because he sings the Jonas Brothers songs in the shower, somehow forgetting that preteens can't vote. As Garrett and his associates in the sociology blog The Conversation stated, the truth is, understanding online political satire isn't easy. Many satirical websites mimic the tone and appearance of news sites, going back to Lindsay's definition of fake news and misinformation. You have to be familiar with the political issue being satirized. You have to understand what normal political rhetoric looks like, and you have to recognize exaggeration. So it's easy when we see it on The Onion or Babylon Bee or any of those other satire sites. But when we see it in our Facebook feed, we have to make that concerted effort to actually look at it and realize that it's this being, that it's satire instead of, news.
So the second phase of this game of telephone is the spread of misinformation, and that can get out of hand wildly, very quickly, with the help of the internet. So, on the internet, content is spread, modified, taken out of context, spread again until it's way far from the original and far from the truth. So some rhetorical questions I'll pose to you as you think about this while we talk is what you're sharing truthful and accurate? What if you're just sharing a meme? What about the things your friends, family, or coworkers are sharing? And if not, how can you tell? And also, what could the possible ramifications be of spreading such information? In an interview, Donald Barclay, who is the deputy university librarian at UC Merced, said, "The incredible volume of information out there in the digital age just blows away anything that existed before, as does the speed at which information travels and the low cost, almost zero in fact, at which information can be created and distributed." Another article in The Biologist discussed how anti-vax messaging and false information being spread online has led to what they call vaccine hesitancy and an increase of vaccine preventable diseases around the world. They said the UK lost its measles-free status with the World Health Organization after more than 200 cases of the disease were recorded in the first quarter of 2019. And that's wild to think about because we've had a measles vaccine for nearly 60 years now. And so why is that disease making a comeback all of a sudden? What has changed? And what has changed is the accessibility of misinformation. And then another article from the Phi Delta Kappan Journal reiterated the dangers of misinformation spread with a really powerful quote. And they wrote, "People may believe in and act on it, harming themselves or others, and may come to disregard and distrust authentic information needed to carry out their civic duties as informed citizens, thereby harming our democracy." And that, I mean, that right there says it all. So, you know, when you share a meme or you share an article that may not have correct information, you know, maybe you're sharing a satirical piece and it's funny to you because you know that it's not true and you like the humor behind it. But someone else might not know that that's not true, or might not have the same level of ability to discern truth from rumor or to look into that further. And they may not have the same critical thinking skills when it comes to what they see online. So even if you know what you're sharing is not true or truthful or the full truth, someone else might not know that. So it can be harmful. And like they said, you know, our civic duty is to be informed citizens. And that's really, really powerful, I think.
So for the next two slides, I want you to be thinking about what we've already discussed, and I want you to look at the options presented with a critical eye. And this is going to require some participation, so open up your chats. On the next slide and the one following, there will be two images side by side. I'm going to ask you to give me your opinion as to which is fake or misleading and which is trustworthy. We'll also talk a little bit about why they were selected and what clues we can discern from them. So on the left side, we have an article that reads, in part, while ICE has forced some turbines to shut down, just as a brutal cold wave drives record electricity demand, that's been the least significant factor in the blackouts, according to Dan Woodfin, a senior director for the Electricity Reliability Council of Texas, which operates the state power grid. And this is going back to the recent power outages in Texas. On the right side, we have an article that reads, in part, well, the good news is that all that alternative energy seems to have had a remarkable effect on the climate Sunday night. Parts of Texas got the temperatures that we typically see in Alaska. In fact, they were the same as they were in Alaska. So global warming is no longer a pressing concern in Houston. The bad news is they don't have electricity. The windmills froze, so the power grid failed. Millions of Texans woke up Monday morning having to boil their own water because with no electricity, it could not be purified. So which of these is fake or misleading and which is true? Braden says the right is misleading. Do we have any dissent? Okay, Courtney agrees with Braden.
Braden, can you offer some info about why you thought that? What kind of led you to go with your gut on that one?
Braden, I can allow you to talk if you'd like.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Braden.
Not to put you on the spot, Braden, but thanks
Oh,
for
good.
thanks for putting yourself out there.
So the main reason why is because it says that global warming is no longer a pressing concern, which really has like not a lot of correlation, and it's like trying to mislead people to believing this big thing that they're trying to say, and it also has like no facts or anything to other than the low temperatures in Texas, but that could just be it could be anything. So that's why I believe that.
Yeah. And you're right, by the way, the right one is misleading. This is a opinion piece found on Fox News. And like we talked about earlier, opinion and commentary can slide from, just that opinion and commentary into misinformation pretty easily, especially, as it's, how it's portrayed. And the one on the left is from Bloomberg. And I'm not trying to say to trust one over the other, because Bloomberg is obviously, biased. They have a very left-leaning bias. Fox News, as many of us are aware, has a right-leaning bias. So I'm not saying trust one or the other, but a lot of it boils down to language. The sarcasm that's dripping from these sentences, and especially down here where he talks about the ironically named Electric Reliability Council. Things like this that are very hyperbolic. I think that's how you say that word. That word that I can't pronounce, or sarcastic in tone, are generally found more often in fake news, misleading news, misinformation, things like that. Whereas journalistic reporting, is going to have the more standardized language. It's not going to be so full of hyperbole and satire or sarcasm. All right, so round two. These are two front page websites or news websites. So on the left, we have headlines such as "Powerful Globalist Group Sends Joe Biden His Marching Orders," "Reassessing the Capitol Insurrection," "Red Plague," "DHS Thinks All Libertarians Are Terrorists." And on the right, we have "Supreme Court Paves Way for Release of Trump tax returns," "About a third of Texans still facing disrupted water supplies," "Exclusive, US plays down Iran rhetoric, waits to see if Tehran resumes talks." So which is fake or misleading, and which is a more trustworthy site?
This one's harder because we're evaluating the sites as a whole and not particular pieces, right?
Yeah, and we don't have the titles either, the
Yeah.
website titles.
Braden is saying the left is misleading, the website on the left. Does anyone else think otherwise? Does anyone have anything suspicious they see with the one on the right?
All right, so once again, Braden is correct. Thank you for participating, Braden. Yes, go Braden. And Sean is right. There's more factual information on the right. So the left side is the website American Free Press, which has been shown to be a fake news site that kind of tries to mix in biased reporting to give a little more credibility. So for instance, if you read "Reassessing the Capitol Insurrection," you'd see that while none of it's fake or made up, it's still highly biased. And then on the right, this is the front page for Reuters, which is a well-known and well-respected news service that tries to stay as middle of the road as possible. And yeah, Braden is again correct that the left is also trying to use clickbait to grab attention. And that leads back to one of our original reasons for fake news and misinformation is, to generate money. They want people to click on these things. They want people to have emotional responses because that's how they make their money.
So I've always wanted to demonstrate this in a class. So this is my time to shine. I am going to start sharing my screen here. And what you're looking at is a tweet that I pulled up. And it is, I don't know if you guys know this, but it is very easy to change the text on a web page. It's pretty straightforward. And I'll show you how easy it is. And I'm not showing you this to teach you how to make your own fake news. Please don't. But it's really interesting and fascinating to me. So you could change someone's tweet, take a screenshot of it, and then post it anywhere that you want. And I have to have Ian talk while I do this. But basically what you do is, I'm in Google Chrome right now. So if I right click on this page and go to inspect, I will be able to see all of the elements on this page. And when I highlight over each of these elements, the corresponding portion of the page on the left is highlighted. So it tells me where I need to click into these drop-down arrows to drill down into what I'm looking to change. And so I'm going to do that while Ian talks, because I can't do them both at the same time.
Yeah, so here, Lindsay's editing an actual tweet, and then she can, like she said, screenshot it and share it. You can also do this in Photoshop. It's a little more difficult, and you have to know a little bit more about editing to do that, but it's possible. For videos, there's a technique called deep faking, where they create a computer generated video and make it look like the celebrity or public figure said something or did something. And a lot of times they use sound editing software to take captures of that person speaking, and then edit it a little bit to make it actually sound like, Joe Biden said something, or Donald Trump said something, or LeBron James. And this actually has become a lot more popular as technology has improved. You also see something similar with political ads. Think back to our recent election and all the ads that we saw. And a lot of times what they do there is, super edit a video to splice different sections together and make it look like, an opponent said something when they didn't.
So I found it. I had to go way deep in here, as you saw, and then I found where his tweet text was, and I double clicked on it and I typed whatever I want, and I hit enter, and it changes the look of his tweet. So all I need to do now is take a little screenshot, snip that, and I can post it wherever I want, and it looks just like he wrote it. The only way to really, fact check whether this is fake is to go to the person's account on Twitter and look through their tweet history, or to go to the original website and see if you can, see if it says the same thing. But I probably could have changed the comments on this page. I probably could have changed the text over here on the right with the links to other places. So it's easy, right? And it's happened before. There are tweets out there, supposedly from Donald Trump, that don't exist anywhere. So who made that? What happened there? So it's something to think about. So at this point, you may be asking this question, and that UC Merced librarian I was talking about earlier said, one of the dangers of this information overload is that people will just give up. They will say, it's all BS, so I'm just gonna go with what feels right. And he says that's not a good place to work from. That kind of total cynicism, that's everything's a lie, so that we might not as well even try. That's something that we've heard before in classes that we've been in as well. Then nothing's real, right? So if it's this easy to spread misinformation, and there's biased and there's misinformation on both sides of the political spectrum, and even supposedly trustworthy websites can have misleading articles. How would I even know ever if something is real? There's no way to try, no point trying, and it's overwhelming. But this is not the mindset that you want. You can do this. You can, sleuth out what's real, what's not. You don't have to be an expert to be able to do this, but there are a lot of criteria you can use to kind of evaluate what you see in the information wilderness, right? But for right now, here's a couple really quick, you're probably familiar with them. They're really easy to use, popular websites for checking out rumors that you may see. So one of them is Snopes. And what the bottom of the text says there is, it's a general fact checker for misinformation, urban legends, and rumors. So Snopes fact checks information on a variety of subjects. It's not just politics. For this screenshot that I got, I went onto Snopes and they have a search bar at the top, and I wrote Kanye West. I just searched for Kanye West and I found all sorts of different current events that are happening with his name in them. And then I found this particular one. And so I looked at it and they fact checked president and found that to be true, which is pretty interesting. Slightly terrifying, but there you have it. And you can see with that big green checkbox at the bottom that, it's really easy to see whether or not these claims have been proven true or if they're not true. So you can do that with other things too. I think I used this site back in the summer when I saw something circulating on Facebook about Betsy DeVos and how it was something that I couldn't remember it exactly, but it was something about how she didn't, it was about how she didn't care how many kids might get coronavirus because it was, it would be such a small percentage anyway of the student population in the United States and didn't really matter. And they had a heated debate behind it. I mean, there were so many comments, so many people shared it. It was kind of a meme style image of her, looking mad. And then they had, the text of the caption on the photo. And one of my relatives shared it. And I thought, okay, this is crazy that, did she really say this? I can't live with myself if I look at this and know that it's not right. So I think I went to Snopes or PolitiFact, I can't remember which one, typed in her name. That meme came up like immediately, that exact one that had been going viral at that time. And not only had it been debunked by these fact-checking sites, but they checked the math that was in the meme because there was some math on it about how many students would get coronavirus and die or something really awful. And the math wasn't even right. Like someone fact checked that math and they were like, yeah, that doesn't even correspond to how many kids there are in public schools in the United States. It was just weird. So I ended up putting a comment on there that was like, hey, this has been debunked. Maybe you might want to check this site out. I don't want to start a fight, but I wanted to make sure the people who had shared it and commented on it saw, that, hey, whoa, we shouldn't take this at face value. So Snopes is a good website for stuff like that, as well as the next one, PolitiFact. You've probably heard of this as well. This focuses solely on politics. And this is actually just a screenshot of their main page with some recently fact-checked claims. And they use this really easy to understand traffic light color system, which indicates which claims are false in red, which are half true in yellow, so ones that might be misleading, and then also ones that are just true in green. So you can also search for specific people or events and things like that on this site. And I think this is the one that I searched Betsy DeVos on and found that particular viral post that I had seen. So the last phase of this is it's time to stop the rumors, time to hang up the phone, and it's time to expose the truth and just politely hang up on these people.
Yes, it's time to realize that we've been bamboozled, as some of my family members like to say. So don't talk to strangers. I love this meme because it's actually pretty true. My parents, when I was a kid, don't believe everything you read on the internet. my parents now. Believe, I gotta move my thing. Believe and repost everything they read on the internet. Though it's intended humorously, for some of us millennials, I'm the tail end of the millennial generation and younger, this is actually a highly accurate portrayal of how the tables have turned. My growing up, my parents said, don't talk to strangers, don't believe everything you read, all of that. And now it's, the younger generation saying the exact opposite. Partly it's because older generations were used to trusting voices like Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite, Mike Wallace, Dan Rather. And they were used to getting their news from sources like local papers, local radio, local TV stations, with the most important topics being discussed on a national level. Some researchers found that they took a population of 3,500 Facebook users, and found that the older generations, starting at about 45 years and up, were more likely to share fake news to their fake Facebook friends. This is true even when holding other characteristics, including education, ideology, and partisanship constant. And so they found that as their Facebook groups aged, those that were past about 45 were much more likely to share fake news on social media than younger generations. And again, I think it kind of harkens back to they're used to, they used to be able to trust a lot of what they saw. And yeah, Trey, don't believe everything you see on TV. And I'm sure there's a quote somewhere that Abraham Lincoln said that, because I've seen memes. In fact, I was looking at one before this one that I was going to post. It was Abraham Lincoln. So we know that there's fake stuff out there. So how do we identify and avoid fake news? One method is to treat it like many of us do when we're looking to make a big purchase. One of those big ticket, high expense items. For example, a few years back when my wife and I bought our house, we needed to buy a fridge. So what did we do? We did some research. We talked to salesmen at the big box stores, double checked what they were saying. We looked at reviews online. And then, at first we only looked at manufacturers we trusted, Maytag, GE, those manufacturers. And actually, these are really similar to the techniques that are used in identifying what is fake and what can be trusted in news and information. So, when you're shopping for high expense items, we're often dealing with salesmen, whether it's a car or, somebody like, Best Buy if you're looking for TV, or Home Depot and Lowe's when you're looking at house stuff. And so in terms of news, information and social media, those same salesmen tend to be our family and friends. So a lot of times, they tell us, oh, I read this article, or in Lindsay's case, shared a post about Betsy DeVos saying that, kids are going to die. So let's go ahead and open up the schools, or whatever it was. So unless we want to offend them, generally we have to listen, or we have to see it. And listening is never a bad thing, because it helps us to uncover biases. It gives us a better understanding of their worldview, of how they look at things. And it can also tell us how firm in their convictions they are. As we'll get into a little bit later, one thing we need to do is we need to normalize saying, hey, that's not right. And Lindsay will talk about that in a minute. But if we know that they're never going to change their mind, that might change how we approach it. So once we've listened to what they've said, that doesn't mean we need to agree with them. So, once we've listened to a car salesman, that doesn't mean we need to buy that, brand new car that he's trying to sell us. We need to then turn around and do a little more research for ourselves. So, you read reviews a lot of times. If I'm buying a fridge, I read reviews about various different types of fridges. And when it comes to news and information, reviews are essentially what people have said about the topic, what they've said about the creator or the author, what they've said about the website, and who the owner of the website is, and maybe what what that owner is trying to accomplish. So we can do this by opening a number of browser tabs, in Chrome or Edge, or Firefox or Opera or whatever web browser you're using. You have the ability to open multiple tabs across the top. So open those tabs up and do a simple Google search. Just type in the topic, or search for the author. See what their credentials are. How trustworthy are they? Are they known to be very factual in their reporting, or are they known to spread rumors and fake news? Is this website a fake news website, or is it one that we know we can trust? And a lot of times we do this before we've actually even read the entire article. I'll do that a lot of times when it's something I'm not entirely sure of, that somebody shared on Facebook, or I find in my general searching. I'll see what they have to say, at the either the headline or whatever, and then I'll dig into the rest of it, on the side before I go back to the article. So doing a quick Google skim like this, can sometimes give us all the answers we need, and then we don't even have to bother moving on. And then lastly, as we're shopping around, we looked at first, the manufacturers that are familiar to us, and the ones with the best reputations. Like we all know that Maytag and GE and Whirlpool, and some of those Frigidaire, they make refrigerators like that was known to us. But that doesn't mean that we didn't look elsewhere, because eventually we settled on a Samsung. But we started with what we knew we could trust. And the same is true when looking at the news. Start with trusted and familiar sources. For instance, I tend to rely heavily on AP, Reuters, and USA Today for my news. And then, a lot of times I'll kind of branch out and I'll hit New York Times and I'll hit Fox News. That way I get a nice mix of, left leaning and right leaning. That way we have a foundation of knowledge. We have a foundation of understanding what's in the news currently, and then we can kind of expand from there. And sources like New York Times and Fox News, they have that known bias. I know that they're trying to, they're portraying things in a left or right leaning way, so that I can account for that. But if I start out with a website I'm not familiar with, or I don't know if I can trust, right off the bat, I have to start thinking, okay, are they trying to persuade me? What's their political bias? What are they trying to accomplish? How come nobody else in the world is talking about this particular topic? So those are things that we can do to kind of evaluate news and information as we go. Treat it like you do shopping. Don't believe everything you read. Look at what others say and start with those you trust, and then go from there.
So what do you do about Aunt Gertrude and Uncle Cletus posting on their Facegrams? And I also want to note that those who spread misinformation are not just our outspoken friends and family like Aunt Gertrude and Uncle Cletus. Anybody of any age, background, political affiliation, education level, anyone can fall victim to this type of messaging. So one of the things that's really important is to normalize challenging what other people say, sort of like how I did with my family member who had the Betsy DeVos post. I saw it and I knew I couldn't ignore it because it sounded so icky. So I looked into it and then I shared what I had found about that statement. It's really easy to avoid confrontation or just roll our eyes at what we see, and to resist potentially damaging our relationships with others. But there's an article where the author writes, allowing unsubstantiated or biased information to stand unchallenged is harmful in itself. And so what we want to do is we want to encourage fact checking before sharing or posting or reacting to other people's posts. And you can lead by example. So be sure that you're taking these steps yourself. And much of misinformation is fueled by emotions and opinions. So arguments can easily ensue. This is the biggest thing that we hear from students when we talk about this is like, oh, people who post that just want to fight. And, there's no way to have a productive conversation about this. So I think the best way to go about it is to just be courteous, be polite, whenever you're questioning something others might have shared, but don't engage in an argument like they are wanting. There's an NPR article called The Psychology of Fake News, and it said a community that encourages individuals to point out when statements are false or unclear or vacuous benefits everybody by helping discern the truth. There's another article by Harper and Bagley, and they wrote, it's called You Are Fake News. And they wrote, it may not be enough to ask people to think more critically about political news or to ask social media websites to highlight the assessed accuracy of news articles. This may even exacerbate the use of fake news or the fake news label to delegitimize opposing viewpoints. So instead, they say, we might look to facilitate greater levels of communication between those with opposing political outlooks. So we all need regular practice with this, and we need to challenge ourselves to look beyond sources that just reinforce our existing beliefs, because remember, we all have bias. So here are some recommended books that we would love for you to check out yourself. All of these should be available through the LCC library. We're closed right now because of COVID, but when we are reopened one day, these are on our shelves and they're available for students, faculty, and community members to check out. Community members can have community borrowing privileges with our library. And we link to our slides at the end of this presentation. And so you can actually access our slides for this, and you can see all of the full titles and the links to more information on each of these books from there. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a presentation by librarians if we didn't cite our sources. And that's all that I have. Ian, do you have anything else for now?
No, that's all I have as well.
So, yeah, go to the last slide because it's much nicer to look at than this one.
Oh, come on. You don't want to look at just...
It's Ian in a community conversation from before the COVID.
I'd prefer we didn't look at this slide.
So does anyone have any questions about anything we talked about today, or any comments that they'd like to share at this point?
I do want to jump in on one thing and say that if you are hankering for libraryness, a lot of local public libraries are using ebook checkouts and audiobook checkouts online. So programs like the Libby app are a good place to access books in this time when we can't actually physically go to a library, as well as a lot of libraries are now doing curbside pickups. So contact your local library and see what options might exist so that you can keep reading during this lovely time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point. And if you're affiliated with LCC, we do have a very large ebooks database, as well as an Overdrive audiobooks database that you can check out. And I don't know if some of the specific titles we put on these slides are available through there, but there are a lot of texts on misinformation, fake news, information literacy, and Ian and I can help you find those. So yeah, you can email us at the email address on this slide here.
And you just completely predicted the first question to come in, which is Sean asks, can the books be checked out digitally from a digital library? Check it out,
Great.
Don't know the individual titles, but look those up and see where they might be found.
Yeah, definitely, Sean. And Sean, if you're a student with us, ask us, we'll help you.
Linda also says that the Longview Library is now open. Yay. That's good.
Awesome.
And Trey says it could be a useful strategy rather than challenge the truthiness of a claim, points for the use of truthiness, to lead someone, if they're willing, with a Socratic exploration of the claim, where someone is getting their information, why they trust that source, and what would be some logical consequences if their claims were actually true.
Wow.
Love that.
It's been a long time since I heard the term Socratic exploration. But I love it.
That's what
Yeah.
the social sciences are here for.
No, thanks, Trey. That's great.
No, I think that's a great idea. Because a lot of times, as we're sharing things, especially on social media, since it is such a emotional reaction, that's what they're looking for, is us to, base things off of emotion and not really stop and think. A lot of times we're not even looking at the source of what we're sharing. It might be just the headline or the, a little bit of the text that is displayed. They're like, oh man, I love that, I got to share it. And we don't realize that, that source is coming from somewhere else. So I think Trey's idea of, asking them where they get their information and why that source is trustworthy, a lot of that can be very useful.
Well, thank you very much, Lindsay and Ian, for sharing this information with us and walking us through, some strategies on how to deal with misinformation and how to understand communication better. So thank you all to our audience for joining us and for participating. Big shout out to Braden for being our guinea pig, and for everybody else for coming. And please join us again next week. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.